Ready? Let's go. So, acharda. This video is basically going to be an overview of Irish spelling, tiny comments on proper Irish pronunciation, and at the end I'm going to talk about different ways of reading Irish pronunciation, all topics that I'm going to do longer videos on in the future, just to basically give a foundation, an introduction to everything I'm going to talk about over the next few days. So, first thing, surprisingly, that I'm going to say is, when it comes to Irish spelling, Irish is obviously written with an alphabet, right? In over the last 100 years, Irish has just been written with regular fonts, regular Latin text, right? That's fine. But there also used to be an older Irish script, the Gaelic script, right? You can still find things to type with that online. There were a few differences. It basically looked like this, and I'm going to make a video about that as well. So, the Irish alphabet is essentially the same as the English alphabet, the Latin alphabet, without the use of J, K, Q, V, W, X, Y, Z, right? They don't exist naturally in the Irish language except in loan words, right? So obviously, you have words like violin, names like, if your name's Jake, you can't really do anything about that. X-ray is X-ra. But anyway, so that leaves us in Irish with only 18 letters, right? Which isn't that many. And however many, 26 letters works fine for Latin, but is really terrible for Irish, because Irish has actually 33 consonant sounds. Now forget letters. Consonant sounds, actual sounds that you produce. Irish has 33 of them. Like, to highlight the difference, English has 24 consonant sounds. So that includes, in English, th, sh, ch. You get the gist. Actually, no. Irish has at least 33 consonant sounds in other dialects, and depending on how native your pronunciation is, it's at least 33. Anyway, so in order to get past that issue of 18 letters for 33 consonant sounds, we needed to add some new rules, right? So the reason we have so many consonant sounds is that every consonant in Irish, this is my message to the world, because once you know this, you'll start to research and your pronunciation will improve. Every consonant in Irish comes in a pair of two. One broad and one slender, right? So those words will be mentioned in the classroom in Irish, but it's never really properly explained to you. So every single consonant comes in a pair, one broad, one slender. That means there's a slender B, a broad B. There's a slender F and a broad F. There's a slender, I don't know, anything. Literally think of it. You name it. Slender L, broad L. And all of them, all of those consonants are different to the pronunciations that you'll find in English, right? So if you're using English consonants or English pronunciation while speaking Irish, I mean, it sounds stupid to say out loud, but 99% of learners won't know this and they will just use English pronunciation, right? The way I think of it is, when Americans learn Spanish and they're all like, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? That is basically how Irish is treated. So if you speak Irish with the exact same accent that you would have when you speak English, there are improvements to be made, major improvements to be made. So, like, you'll get it in schools. Almost every teacher has just poor pronunciation, and it's the worst in Dublin. If you have a Blanche girly who sounds like, oh my god, I fucking love my laboo fucking whatever, and she speaks Irish and she says, oh my yeah, Connick May, mo madra fucking and yay agus, like, it's even lum ma mommy, whatever. That isn't anywhere close to correct pronunciation. It's simply not correct. And so I say it's not hard. It does take time, but after a week or two of understanding the correct sounds that are present in Irish, understanding that 90% of the sounds in English can't be used in native Irish speech, then you'll start to improve. So, yeah, the only consonant, actually, moving on, back on track, the only consonant sound that Irish and English share exactly the same is H. H, which is just breathing, obviously. H. So H is the same in English and Irish, right? But other than that, they're all different. So that brings me to the spelling of broad and slender consonants. So obviously I'm going to make more videos. I'm going to deep dive into how exactly to pronounce, let's say, for example, a broad B versus a slender B, highlighting how they're different to the English, showing that they, they are different. They're unique sounds, but that's for another time. When it comes to spelling purely, a broad consonant is written beside, so on either side, is written beside what we call broad vowels, A, O, and U, right? Easy. And a slender consonant is written beside what we call slender vowels, I and E. So this is similar to the English, how English treats C and G. So C is pronounced one way if it's beside A, O, U, as in cat, corn, culture, versus scent and circus, right? It's a similar thing, except in Irish it has to have that spelling beside certain vowels has to happen on both sides of the consonant, right? So if I can think of a good example, Asian, Ireland, is spelt E followed I, and then or EANN. So the or is slender, and because of that, on either side, you'll only find slender vowels. If, let's say, you left out the let's say you left out the I, or let's say you left out the E, then according to the spelling rule, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a broad or a slender or, because there's both types of vowels on either side, which isn't allowed, right? This also leads to, even in the word Asian, I think, but in so many thousands of Irish words, there are vowel letters, so A, E, I, O, U, letters that are inserted into words that historically were never pronounced, right? So you go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, these vowel sounds weren't actually there, but they're just within the word as a hinting vowel to show, to act as a reminder that the consonant beside that letter is broad or slender, right? So I really should have come with some examples. Well, it's similar to the English guide, right? If you think of the word guide, Guide, what is actually being pronounced there is a G sound, the sound I, and then the end of the word duh, right? So in a way, the word could survive by itself as being spelled Gide, but according to the English spelling rules, a G beside an I can never be pronounced G. So if you like to think of it in this way, a U is being inserted into the spelling of the word as a reminder that the G isn't pronounced soft. So let me think of an example of an Irish word. Yeah. So this is my little fuck Lloyd polka, and if you look, this word is spelled FOCL for the I, or, right? So we can tell instantly by the spelling whether or not we know how to pronounce these consonants perfectly. We know instantly by the spelling it's a broad F, a broad C, a broad L, because they're flanked by a broad vowel, and then ending with a slender or, right? Because the or is flanked by a slender vowel, right? And then in the word polka, the P is broad and the C is broad, right? That wasn't the end of it. That I, letter I, never actually was pronounced in the language. So instead, what the spelling opts for is to insert an I to show that basically to hint that the consonant beside the I is pronounced slenderly. Easy beans, right? Another thing about that word that you've seen, which is very important in Irish, is a little accent, right? So that accent, the native term for that accent is Sheena or Sheena Fada, which means long symbol. Most people just refer to it as a fada, which is the Irish word for long, right? It's very easy. Any vowel that has a fada on it is pronounced long. And I'm going to go into that in another video. We also have less double letters than English, but sometimes you will see either double N, double L, or double R, and they can affect the vowels around them. And that's all I say. I would love to say more, but I need to cut this down. So, the next concept of Irish spelling is mutations, right? It's probably one of the hardest things about Irish grammar at all. So, a mutation is, to put it simply, a change in the sound of a consonant, right? So, Irish has two main types of mutation, right? One called lenition and one called eclipsis. Within a word, right? So, like in the middle or the end of a word, if a mutation is present, it's permanent, right? It's not going to change. That's just the pronunciation of a word. So, any example would do. Let's say the word for dark, dorcha. So that C, right, has been lenited. So we spell it as, in the modern spelling, CH. Lenition basically means softening. Uru or eclipsis is more complicated. So, yes, in the word dorcha, the CH is permanent, right? But at the beginning of a word, depending on the context that the word is in, right, within the sentence, it can be either on the lenition or eclipsis can either be on or off. Get me? So, if you see lenition in the middle or the end of a word, so anything written with a H, BH, MH, PH, FH, CH, GH, DH, TH, SH. Anywhere else in the word, that's permanent, right? That can't change. But at the start of a word, it just depends on the context. So I'll give a really quick example. The word mo means my, right? And mo always lenites or softens a consonant, the first consonant of the word that follows, right? So if I have, we'll keep going with the letter C. If I have, what's a word that starts with ko? Coat. So if I have, the Irish word coat is cóta. By itself, the word is cóta, right? And if I have my coat, that's mo chóta, right? So because the context being mo, the first consonant changes. And lenition is easy to understand because it's easy to say lenition is the softening of a consonant, right? You can hear that obviously ch is a softer sound than k, but lenition is also harder because there's a lot more rules, a lot more contexts to memorize than for eclipsis. Eclipsis, I could explain in maybe 15 minutes. I think there's like 10 or 15 contexts for eclipsis, Um, whereas for lenition, there's definitely over 30. At least it's not over 100. So you should be grateful. Yes, so that's me talking about mutations. Moving on. So related to that, related to lenition, right? As I said, in the middle of a word or at the end of a word, lenited consonants are permanent, right? But some of the pronunciations of lenited consonants have been there for so long that they actually have just become pronounced as vowels. That sounds really complicated. I'll explain it with a quick example in English with the word bought, right? So obviously you learn in English that a G is pronounced G, right? But OUGH isn't pronounced OG, isn't pronounced OG. The consonant there, even though there's a consonant letter, isn't pronounced anymore, right? It's just a rule that OUGH is pronounced O. And this happens all the time in Irish. Just to give some quick examples, ADH isn't pronounced AG or AG or AD or anything. It's pronounced I. So when I was practicing getting consonants to be pronounced right, I took the fact that DH was pronounced R and I ran with it, and I started pronouncing it in every word. Where I was wrong was that I forgot, or I didn't know that there's loads of these consonant vowel combinations that are pronounced just as open vowel sounds, right? Another one is OGH or OGHA, which is pronounced, in Munster at least, O. So you get words like toe, or in other dialects, toe, which means great. Yeah. Moving on. So I'm just gonna run quickly through this because it's a lot. The last thing that you need to know about Irish spelling is sometimes there are quite big clusters of consonants, right? So L, N, and OR often come right beside other consonants within words, right? And when this happens, what you often end up with to ease pronunciation is a tiny vowel that isn't written in between, right? So let's say this word, the Irish word for fist is spelled like this, DORN, right? But it's not pronounced durn as you might in English. The cluster or N, right? Because there's an or there, to make the pronunciation easier, you add a little vowel sound, so it's pronounced durn or with the word for blue, same thing. A little vowel sound is added there, so it's not pronounced gurm or gurm. It's pronounced gurm. So sometimes words that look like they're one syllable will actually be two, right? And it won't be written. Yeah. So next, when it comes to capital letters, it's similar to English. Place names, proper nouns, people, languages all get capital letters. And the only thing that's really different is when there's a mutation on the first consonant of a noun that has a capital. That capital letter stays capital, right? So we have something like, again, I'm going to use an easy example, na héireann. So na will give a H sound to any word that begins with a vowel, which includes héireann, which means of Ireland, right? But Ireland is obviously a place name. It's a proper noun. So even though technically the H is beginning the word, the ifada stays capitalized, right? There's also rules for if all of the letters are capitalized. Sometimes what you can do is have small caps for mutations, which I think looks really unique and stylistic. Anyway, the next topic is dictionaries. So